Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm your hostess, Snappy, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Dion. How's it going, Dion?
Life is great. Glad to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Happy Sunday. And we're back this time for part 2 of our deep dive into New Mexico mysteries. So before we start, as always, we want to give you just a bit of a disclaimer. This episode is going to get a bit racy. We're going to see some, sexual content from some creepy secret societies. We're going to see some pretty intense magical rituals that some people may not want associated with their culture. But just remember, we're just explorers. We're not trying to pass judgment. We're just trying to tell a good story and explore the history and explore people's beliefs. So with that being said, last episode was a really wild episode. We had really started to dive deep into a lot of that like American indigenous stuff, specifically around that Chaco Canyon. You were showing us how that particular site is basically a star map and was also like a meeting place for several different tribes, and even potentially the Aztecs were coming there from the south. There was all this weird mythology about this gambler figure who came from the south with the drugs, specifically Datura, and gambled their way into taking over that site. So fill us back in on what we had talked about previously and where are we going today.
All the same topics from last week. Just we're going to go deep dive into it. Chaco Canyon. It was a brief era that it was prosperous, maybe like a 500-year reign over time. That's not a long time in history. And let's say around 1050, 1054, something happens that changes the history of the tribes in that region and around the world as well. Let's hit the first picture.
Oh, interesting. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Supernova. There was a supernova in 1054 that was seen in different parts of the world. Was visible for several months, even in the day. And it changed some of for shamanistic or animistic tribes, they saw it as a sign. This is about the time there was the decline at Chaco Canyon. As well, this is the time that the Aztecs moved into Mexico City. This period between, let's say, 1050 to 1150. And we talked about before how there was a trade network set up between Chaco Canyon and the Mayans and Aztecs down in New Mexico. And they found that evidence through different pottery, chocolate, parrot feathers, macaw feathers. And we'll go more deeper in that today. And the thing is, let's go to the next picture. They recorded this image into petroglyphs, that supernova. Oh, yeah. And even there's different cultures around the world. You type in the 1054 supernova that saw it. And things did change that in that time at the canyon. Now, in terms of the Aztecs, which is below them, we talk about how people say that people came from Mexico or Aztecs came from Mexico up to Chaco Canyon. I got a little more into the Aztec myths. Aztecs are known to come from northern Mexico. And
interesting.
The people that are kicked out of Chaco Canyon are known to go down to northern Mexico. But what I got to tell you at this time is, like when we showed those other maps, back in the day, this Chaco Canyon was Mexico originally.
Of course, yeah.
When the Native American times, it was part of a Native American kingdom that went down to Mexico. And then before, when it became New Spain, let's go to the next picture and we'll put it in perspective. So you see how Santa Fe down to Mexico City, that's New Spain. Let's say that's not New Spain. Let's just say that's a Native American kingdom. And that's where it spread from, because that's where the trading network there's evidence of between that region right there. And when New Spain came in, what Spain would do a lot with the mission system is they would put it on top of existing temples and infrastructure of the different tribes. So if it was a holy sacred spot, they would build a mission on top of it. And
Classic Catholic practice, you know?
yeah, and you could see that's the edge of the system up there where Santa Fe is, you know, and going down. And part of that whole kingdom from Santa Fe down to Peru is one of the phenomena we talked about of elongated skulls.
Wild.
You know, in Peru and Mexico, especially, lots more. But in Pecos and in Chaco Canyon, you still get some of them too, with the same accoutrement, chocolate and parrot feathers. You know, so let's go to the next picture. And I want to show you an example of an elongated skull. That's not from Chaco Canyon. I'm not saying that. That's from Peru. And they have red hair. And different forms of elongated skulls. The first being cranial deformation, where a baby has two boards placed on its head when it's soft, and it shapes, but it doesn't change the cranial capacity. It just rearranges the shape of it. Whereas in natural elongated skulls, it naturally deforms. It's fused that way, and the brain capacity is much bigger. And it's those extra percentages that's all you need if you know anything about brain capacity. So they found elongated skulls at Chaco and at Pecos. And they're part of the ruling class. In the burials, when they did the testing, they found that the ruling class ate better, did denser bones. You know, they had jewelry, they had gold, not gold, but precious items. They lived in a better condition. So in Chaco Canyon, there's lots of mythologies about a ruling class that enslaved the other tribes until they kicked those people out. And so, you know, part of the myth of the Aztecs coming from northern Mexico, they come from 7 caves. It's 7 tribes from 7 caves in northern Mexico. And people, it's called Aztlan. And people will say it's Chaco Canyon. It's the birthplace of the Aztecs. It's not what Snappy's saying or what I can prove. It's just what some of the research that we're looking at and some of the different sources.
It's an interesting theory, right? You know, and it's definitely a possibility. That's wild to think about.
You know, so let's go to the next picture.
And this theme of the red-headed, elongated skulled giants, it's again, it's so ubiquitous. You know?
We're going to be talking about that more. That's why we're just barely getting started. So here's one of these macaws, the scarlet macaws that come down there from the Mayan regions, which are not native to the deserts of New Mexico, but they found an Avery, a burial of them. And the feathers were sacred only to the elite ruling class. And the feathers have different colors. Like, I didn't even know that the colors had symbolic meanings to them, like a rainbow almost. And in terms of 4 the colors representing the 4 directions, and the other 2 colors, the black and the white, representing the up and down or binary, or like a yin and yang thing. And like I said, we've talked about macaw tears, which people posited was a psychoactive substance that's exuded from the back of where the quills attach. But really it's for waterproofing. But people would collect it and take it. The macaws could live some up to 60 years, and they bond to humans. But one of the big parts of them is their vocabulary. A shaman could teach them singing, magic words, and so many different things.
And that's a theme we see. Like, I think of Branwen in the Mabinogi, who famously teaches the starlings how to speak. You know, and this is usually you'll see, you know, the shaman with their animal familiar. So wild.
Oh, stuff. Yeah. So I'm trying to set the stage for Chaco Canyon for who the gambler was and looked like. Somebody that had an elongated skull, parrot feathers, turquoise, copper, psychoactives, wealth, and knowledge as well, because we know about the Mayans did the ball courts. You know, Mayan ball courts, it's a form of a ritualized game. And that's what we're going to get into, is the ritualized games coming up in a second. So let's hit the next picture. You know, here's one of the parrot statues, Mayan parrot statues. You know, the macaws are special. And
Yeah.
so it's for royalty, and there's just so much mythology around it. And another thing that they brought, like I said, was chocolate. And they found the chocolate in pots, cacao pots, which is reminiscent of the Aztecs and Mayans that had the cacao pots. But what people don't know, or some people do, is that cacao in Mayan Aztec culture was used as a transporter, as an admixture, as an exponentiator for mushrooms and other substances, but especially the flesh of the gods, the mushrooms.
Right. No,
And
it's very similar to like what we see with the cow or the goat's milk, right? In Greece.
Oh yeah. And if you're going to have cacao being brought to you from the Mayan temples, I'm pretty sure it would have had the mushrooms in it.
Right.
You know, it's a big part of their culture. Let's hit the next picture and really get into the psychoactives. Because when the priests came,
oops, sorry,
that was one of the things that they wanted to ban with the Indians was their use of psychoactives. They found a heavy use of entheogenic use there in the Southwest with the Pueblo region and Mexico region. This is Xochipilli, Prince of Flowers, deals with fertility, flowers, entheogens. And on this one statue down in Mexico, it has a ton of hallucinogenics all over the body. You could already see right there. There's mushrooms, datura, morning glory.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And these things would be mixed into chocolate. So imagine the gambler had these things. And
it's almost like an ayahuasca analog.
Mm-hmm. And so, chocolate does exponentiate. It's a mild MAOI, which acts as an inhibitor, allowing the body to process DMT a little differently.
And it's a high in fat content as well, so it can form as a base.
Now, at this point, I started using AI in Google Maps because I was like, all right, did they have access to this stuff? Really? I wanted to know. Well, it's a 23-day walk from Chaco Canyon down to Mexico City.
That's nothing when you think about it. We have stories of like these indigenous peoples like running for weeks at a time straight without sleep.
But it's quarter of that time on a boat on the coast up the Gulf, going to like Texas right there, and then coming over.
Place
so I started asking it different questions about, well, how about peyote? That's a 6-day walk over by Texas. We already know they had datura there, tobacco. Another interesting one was the Yuma tribe, 7.5 day walk. And what they have there along the Colorado River is called the Colorado River toad.
Oh, interesting.
You know what that is? Yes, that DMT.
Yeah, it's a different strain of DMT than what you get from the plants.
Oh yeah, because it's beautiful because it has N-DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, and bufotenine, which makes you feel like you're levitating off the ground. It's a special one. And I asked the AI, were they trading? He goes, yeah, Yuma and Chaco Canyon, the Pueblos had a trade connection. So this is all, I'm trying to set the stage for Chaco Canyon for what it was. Because it was hard to live there. There wasn't much agriculture there. It was an inhospitable place. But a lot of people were hanging out there. And also, I asked about the bees. And yeah, they did beekeeping. There was bee motifs, petroglyphs. And the bees were doing wild plants there, as well as any of these plants if you wanted to try to cultivate them and have the bees, acting as a biotransformer for the honey. Or they were saying they were doing honey trade from Mexico, which we know they put the shrooms in the honey down in Mexico.
Right.
Oh, yeah. So let's hit the next pic.
Get that mad honey.
And the nobility in the Pueblo regions there in Chaco had T doors. This is called the T door.
Oh, that's interesting. What's the purpose for this?
Exactly. And so you could try to. Some people say, oh, well, they had backpacks, or some people say it deals with the sun. Some people say it's an indicator of royalty.
Hmm.
There's so just to let you know they're only in certain places do you find these doors, and it's in those places where you might have elongated skulls or that same culture. And these are
Right.
cliff dwellers, and later you'll have Hopi and Navajo in these areas as well. Uh, Now we're going fast, so let's keep going. Let's keep going. If that's a
Oh,
representation of Chaco Canyon right there, what it would look like. Notice there's a singular tree. They found a stump there of a pine tree, of a singular tree, and people posited, well, did it grow there? Did they bring it? Because the closest trees are like 70 miles away. Because all the trees there for the wood that were used in Chaco Canyon were brought from 70 miles away. And some people will say it was brought, the Navajo will say it was brought under the terms of slave labor due to gambling, is how a lot of that was built. But
interesting.
in these round circles are kivas. I don't know if you know what a kiva is, where it's underground house, and you open a door and you go downstairs. So
Yeah,
you
to
don't,
keep it cool. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of them though weren't set up to live in, and some of them weren't even set up to have fire coming out. They're set up as storage or gambling, and so you
Oh,
know,
wow.
yeah. And the acoustics of the canyon are special. They had an amphitheater that was designed to resonate, as well as the other instruments. So let's hit the next picture.
I also wanted to point out that this is that famous shape that you're always showing us to us, Dion. The horseshoe, that we see everywhere with the mysteries.
Yeah. So here's these copper bells, because they were trading and getting copper. We talked about the copper mining, how that's part of history, early American indigenous history. And they had the conch shells. If you know about Indian culture in India, or Native American Indian, with the conch shell. And so
Right.
they were blowing those and dancing, and they would resonate through the canyons. It had an acoustic effect. And in one of the places, it had a standing wave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I want to set the stage for. All right. And so another term they called it there at the canyon was Casablanca, the White House.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
that's where the gambler lived, in the White House, the main house. Um, there's also Casa Grandes, where they eventually go to later on when they leave, when they're evicted, and that's called the big houses, because the big houses is where the royalty lived in, that enslaved the other tribes until they're kicked out. So imagine you come to this place. It's a metaphysical casino, mind you, and you hear sound and conch shells reverberating through the parrots flying around, making weird sounds, singing songs. They taught the parrots to sing, and weird hallucinogens up to 10 at a time. In wealth, they had abalone from California Chumash. That was a 20-day walk between the California Chumash to them, because they found the abalone in the burial sites there that only come from the Chumash coast there in California. And this is like this magic, metaphysical, shamanic world where you could come and get wealth. You could do things. It's ceremonial. So now I want to talk about the aspect of gambling from 3 different nuances, let's say. And the first one being from divination. That divination is gambling. The tarot cards, the I Ching, however, which form it is, it's taking an unknown and pairing that against something that's binary or known or mathematical to have a conclusion, to find out. Even just spitting on the ground, like people's spitters do that, like they'll spit tobacco, or reading tea leaves, or the muses doing the sortes with the muses. Isn't that gambling? Just opening up to a random thing. That's gambling. Because
Totally is.
because the unknown is what nature is. That's the aspect of luck. And so the ancients looked at luck a little differently. Whereas if you and me opened a book and whatever, like a coin toss, Would you give me your car over a coin toss?
No. No, I
But in
would not.
ancient times, they would honor a coin toss. You know what I mean? Like they might be more afraid of that because
No, you're
luck,
right. These things had
lady
power.
luck, nature, randomness, the variable, like George Bataille, the Sacred Grove. It's
Yeah.
gift, sacrifice. It's just a certain connection, the unknown in nature. It's like hunting. It's like they do ceremonies to divine rain.
Yeah, they dance for rain. You see that
That's
a lot
gambling.
of the dancing. And I just keep thinking, like, you know, in my studies, when looking at a lot of various indigenous stuff, you'll see a lot of this where it's like they'll come up with a game or a competition that they hold against the universe. If I can lift this rock above my head, you know, then you have to honor the magic call. And the rock will probably weigh like 600 pounds. Like, these are no easy feats, you know, but you'll see them. It's like they're gambling with God or they're gambling with spirits, you know?
And we know the pharaohs played games. These are the Olympic games, you know, the sacred games. So this culture here would perform games and rituals to divine, should we go to war? Should I plant some corn? Is there going to be rain? And that's shamanic and ceremonial and ritualized. But there's another aspect to gambling. That's the first aspect, is divination. The second aspect is wealth accumulation, as well as wealth distribution. Because in some tribes, they play games to distribute the wealth. Say we all go hunting. We come back, I have more, you have less. So we gamble to everyone kind of is equal. You know, there's some resources, for instance, the parrot feathers are poisons. You can't just barter or buy. You have to gamble for that. That's part of the custom or the rituals. Like, all right, well, if you want some of this sacred poison, we have to gamble for it. That it will leave it up to luck, to nature to decide if you should have it. And that's part of it. And not only is it wealth accumulation, wealth distribution, but also prestige. The prestige of, well, ooh, the gods chose him. You know, he has the luck, the Midas touch, or what you know, the magic touch. It's a certain element back in the day that gambling was more sacred.
Yeah, no, and you're right. There's also, you always hear, this is not necessarily Native American, but another similar idea that you see among some indigenous peoples is like in the Polynesian peoples is mana. This idea that lucky people have like a quantifiable power, you know, that manifests, and you can actually quantify it. They have mana,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, there's a good movie about that.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, not to cut you off. It's called Intacto with Max von Sydow, and it's a multi-language movie, and it's about luck, and it's about people gambling with people and gambling with people's luck.
Yeah, it's wild when you think about it. Yeah, 'cause so much about magic is trying to influence that luck, that randomness in nature to get the desired outcome, right?
Mm-hmm. And then here we'll get into the third nuance of gambling: addiction, which
Right.
is the first reason you're doing it doesn't matter anymore when it becomes an addiction. And it's through this addiction that the gambler took over the people of the Chaco Canyon, the rituals, because they were pretty savvy with the ritualized system. They're savvy with the entheogens. They had some wealth, and they were tricksters. You know, we know about the trickster motif. You know,
Right. Yeah, no, like we were talking before we went on here, the trickster is kind of like an archetypical deity you see represented in many, many different cultures. You know, Hermes or Dionysus in the Greek, but in the African, you get people like Anansi, you know, Loki in the Norse, you know, Robin Goodfellow in like the English. There's all of these various iterations of these figures who engage in deals with people and you know, who can be bought and you know, you have to you have to try and manipulate them into giving you their gold or something, you know,
Mm.
spirits or these deities that offer power and then screw people, you know.
You brought up an interesting thing right there, because I was more not speaking to the aspect of people gambling between people for something.
Right.
But you're talking about, well, am I gambling against God or gambling against the gods? That's a little different. That is included in this. So let's hit the next picture and we'll get into it. This metaphysical casino.
Well, you know, so much of the folklore, even in Europe, it's about this, you know, when you engage with these demons, it's a gamble, it's a risk. You have to outsmart the devil. You have to outplay chess with death, you know?
Yeah, King Solomon tricking them to build his temple.
Right.
Perfect. You know? So NASA studied these roads. And there's people that are using LiDAR to look at the roads and radar. They go for miles around Chaco Canyon, and they don't connect to nowhere. They connect to lunar and stellar alignments.
Interesting.
And they're in between sacred sites. And they were used to align things, but they were used to gamble. We're getting into the gambling. Yeah.
Were they racetracks? Like, where are these?
Yes, sacred racetracks. We might do something like we'll play a game like, well, under the first nuance, well, hey, the first team to win to the sacred site that runs there will determine should we go to war. So you'll dress up as the red team, you dress up as the blue team, and whoever wins first, then we know what we should do because nature decides. We just have to program it. Or it might be the wealth accumulation where you would go to the big city because you had your crops, you had no crops that year. They died because there was a drought. So you go to the big city and you test it against the gambler. You have nothing to offer them. You might say, hey, well, if I lose, I'll give you labor.
Yeah, indentured servitude.
Yeah, but if I win, you got to give me a month's worth of corn and some turquoise or something. And but but we already know when you go to Vegas, the house wins.
Right.
And so the gambler was smart. He had the thing programmed where he might give you a downer and give the other guy an amphetamine. And you know, the games weren't all physical. You know, they played dice. There was dice games. But let's hit the next picture. I want to illustrate a little more because it's famous. The native running, indigenous running. Part of it, they had a communication system set up. Where, like when the conquistadors came, when they got to a certain spot, the natives, when they told them like, hey, how do you know we were here coming? They go, we already knew we were coming days ago because of their running system. And mind you, they're barefoot running in the desert, some of them.
Well, this is one of these wild things where like modern humans or modern peoples, you know, except for some indigenous tribes which have maintained some of this culture, but a lot we're so different than what we were. But I remember studying some of this in anthropology. In like early humans, we were the apex predator, you know, and what we used to do is we would keep jerky and water on us, and then we would just run the deer down. And it would take sometimes days. But the thing is that people can eat, you know, you can eat and run at the same time. You can stop and just take a quick piss, but a deer can't. A deer has to graze and take the time to process their food.
Eventually, you're going to get it.
They'd eventually kick in. So that's how we won. We won by being the ultimate long distance running animal that's ever existed.
Yeah. So these games were so complex, they might have a wet team and a dry team. And imagine that. And then, so if the wet team won, then there'd be rain. And if the dry team won, then it means, it might be a drought.
Oh, no. So then are people on the drought team purposely losing?
You don't know. But some of the games they played were dice, shinny, which is like a hockey, kick stick. These long sticks they found, like field hockey. Um,
Yeah, or lacrosse. You see a lot of those type sports, you know,
yeah,
with the sticks
yeah.
and ball.
This is a giant spot, but also they had copper. And go to the next picture. Yep, there's the dice, a form of they're called sticks, gambling sticks, and then different forms of die. They'd have stones, polished shells, bones, anything.
Yeah, it
And
reminds me of other systems we see, like the I Ching or Lots
yeah,
or IFA.
yeah, yeah, it's just about some kind of mathematical binary system, and then you're testing that against luck. Lady luck. We heard of lady law, lady luck. And then we have to just trust what nature said. But if you're a trickster, you know how to get around this. You know how to weight these things, or two-side them, or give your opponent some datura, or whatever it takes. Because at a certain point, the gambler took over the whole canyon, took over the tribes until he had people enslaved. Like, because just so tricky, just so tricky. Go to the next pick.
Wild. Took advantage of their belief in that the magic of nature and manipulated and broke the games, and then was able to take over.
Turquoise.
Beautiful.
They
Wow.
love turquoise. No poor people wearing turquoise. This is only for the macaw feathers, copper, elongated skulls. You got these are the rich folks. They ate better and they enslaved the other people.
Wow.
But you could go up against them. They're like, sure, you want to play? Let's test it. Come on. Let's test it. If you lose, I get your wife. If you win, I'll give you a half year of food, turquoise. I'll give you 5 wives. Whatever you want. And then they have the parrots singing and talking to them. Come on, try it. Do it. Do it. I'm trying to really paint a picture for you.
You're doing a good job, right? Of these trickster shamans.
Because if we just look at the old archaeological site, it's just this old thing. But
no, and I remember though, you're telling us the stories, right? They have that, like, it's not just that this gambler shows up, but he shows up with the datura, drugs everyone, and steals everything.
yeah, not just datura, all kinds of things. Chocolate, they had all kinds of things. Now, we talked about the snake society and snake dance in the other episode. Horses were there. I asked the AI about it. And it said that not only did they have horses there involved in the games, the gambling games, but they found horse meat in the DNA, in the refuse, because they test that. And not only did they find horse meat, they found human meat because there's cannibalism going on. They ate horses and they ate people. Only the royalty, though. So I'm not bad-mouthing the regular tribes, the Pueblo tribes and Hopi tribes. I'm talking about these people that took over.
Right.
Next level, they're on some next level stuff. And the reason I wanted to put this picture here is because you could see the hoof. He's on top of that snake. And that is a formula for ergot and snake venom, but it's also mythological for killing the demon, for expelling the gambler. Because they eventually kicked the gambler out. And the way they got rid of him was the Dene, the Navajo. There was a young man who was in touch with the animals and all the herbs, like a young shaman amongst this stuff. He had a really beautiful wife. And they came to him and they said, hey, can you go up against the gambler? And when he came in, the gambler saw his wife and saw how young the dude was. He's like, oh, he says, we got an easy one. Come on up. Come to Chaco. What you got? And he won back the people, the Navajo people, and they kicked the gambler out. His pure energy.
That kind of reminds me, it parallels that story you were telling us about the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, with Hiawatha and his wife, and how it's a bit different. There's not a gambling, But they, with the power of diplomacy and the blessing of the Great Mother Spirit, are able to get him to give up the snake ways and to embrace peace, right? And then they comb the peace out of his hair.
And his name means he who combs. And so it's like, what's in a name? So, the name they gave for the guy who beat the gambler was he who gets the people back.
Wow.
So it's prestige. You get a name from gambling as well. So you might introduce you like, oh, here's he who gets the people back. You get that name because you've done something. It's the prestige. And they kicked the gambler out. They kicked his people out. They kicked the big skulls out. They kicked the giants out. The chocolate, the macaws. And the story says that the Dene turned him into an arrow and shot him to Mexico, which fits with the Aztec Ocelot myth that says that they came from northern Mexico.
Wow.
At the same time period when that supernova. But yeah, Chaco Canyon is interesting once you really get into it. And they were the cannibals. It wasn't the regular Hopi tribes. Are the Dene. It was these guys.
These gambling weirdos at Chaco Canyon.
Yeah, they had to kick them out. And
I mean, it is always
Casa Grandes.
Yeah.
They go to Casa Grandes, which means big houses, and that's where they found the meteorite, one of the world's biggest meteorites.
Oh, wow.
We're going to talk about that in episode 3 next week. We're going to get into a whole other thing.
Well, that's exciting because, meteorite worship was another thing that we saw when we were talking about the Middle East in all of our research that was everywhere. Remember with Aphrodite and with Cybele and Saturn, all over the place, these meteorites. So, and again, like this thing with the redheaded giants and them getting kicked out or being removed from society or being seen as kind of like old school. This is such an ongoing theme, not the same, different cultural iterations, but similar. You know what I mean?
So we talked about the Dene Navajo kicking those big skulls out of Chaco Canyon. Well, the Navajo are special in another way too. Let's hit the next pick. There you go.
Right, the Code Talkers. I remember that movie as a young teenager.
yeah, because the Nazis couldn't crack that.
No,
they're speaking that ancient language. That ancient language.
Yeah, there was no cracking it without some kind of code because it was so removed from any of our linguistic systems. Amazing.
Got a 12-year-old boy right there fighting the Nazis. To the power of the language, of the earth language, natural language.
Amazing. That's so cool, and there's always something about secret words and these powerful, there's something about language. It helps shape a culture. It shapes reality, very powerful stuff.
Oh yeah. So let's hit the next pick. All right. So
your staircase again. We saw this with the weird monks and those nuns you were showing us.
Yeah. So we're going to leave Chaco Canyon. All right. That's the first part. We're dealing with the indigenous First Peoples. Now we're going to get into the conquistador, secret societies that came. Once again, Hermanos Penitentes, Sancte Servi Paraclete, and also the nuns of Loretto. That chapel there. And I'm going to break more down about the history of that chapel. It's at this phase that the French step in. They have a bishop, Jean Lemay. Jean Lemay, in a certain French contingent in New Mexico. I thought it was all Spanish, but there's an actual French secret society element there, and they did fight with the Spaniards, behind the scenes. And so Bishop Lemay wanted to build this chapel for the Seven Sisters, dedicated to Mary Magdalene, that came from Kentucky. And actually a couple of them died on the way from Kentucky, but they still named it the Seven Sisters. So they go to build this chapel. Hit the next picture, and I'll show you the chapel there. Yeah, that's it right there. And the reason that staircase is like that is because it originally wasn't there. They go to build the chapel, and they have an architect, which is a French architect with the French bishop. And sure enough, this fancy architect comes into, small town New Mexico, and the bishop's nephew has a sexy wife or sexy girlfriend that falls in love with him, with the architect. So the bishop's nephew gets pissed off and kills him one day before he can finish the construction of the chapel there. And so it's then that the nuns do a novena. That means it's a 9-day ceremony where they pray. And on the 9th day, supposedly another French architect shows up, a whole different one, Rochas. And he builds this spiral staircase. Now, there's nothing to support it, mind you. It's just built straight up, 22 feet up. It has a double helix and 33 steps. And it's built from the spruce that don't come from there. And even to this day, people will argue over who the architect is. But the people that think that was Rochas that did it, he was assassinated as well.
Oh, whoa.
And this weird canyon in New Mexico. So the nuns were so freaked out by that staircase. Now, mind you, to this day, they do tours there for the Da Vinci Code tours because it's still with this French Mason Templar stuff. Like I said, double helix, 33 steps. The nuns would count the steps coming down. They would crawl down on their hands and knees originally.
Terrified of falling, I guess. I wouldn't want to.
The choir up there. That's where they had to go up there and sing, the young girls. And this place was where they sent all the richest to do women at the time in New Mexico. So hit the next picture and I'll show you. You can get a better perspective. Eventually, they had to build a railing. Oh, I can't hear you.
I just said, I'm glad they at least built a railing. Wow.
Yeah, because the girls had to crawl down on their hands and knees. They were so afraid.
That's so ridiculous.
If you just go to the side, it's done.
I wouldn't be
carrying the candle and singing. You have to be carrying the candle and singing. You can't even look. You just, right. And they eventually built the railing. Imagine one girl falls and they just like a domino.
Jeez.
The magic stairs.
Cool looking, but not practical.
And it's attached to Loretto Chapel. They talk about it's Da Vinci Code stuff, that kind of information. And so there's people from all over the world showing up there looking for the Holy Grail and, what have you. So, yeah. So let's hit the next pick. We talked about female secret society. Now we need the male secret society.
I remember when Da Vinci Code first came out and people knowing that I'm a huge geek for all this stuff a couple of my friends came, oh, have you ever heard of this story? They're postulating all this crazy stuff that I never thought about. Like, what if Jesus' family still survived? And if that knowledge was real, don't you think it would destroy the Catholic Church? And I'm just like snickering to myself. I'm like, these conspiracies are as old as the Catholic Church itself.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't give a shit. Never have,
That is
anyway,
true.
It's just funny.
It is true. Right here. So this is not New Mexico. This is Colorado, just right over the border. Because the Hermanos Penitentes, the brothers, the penitents, remember the guys who would whip themselves and crucify themselves in public in downtown Santa Fe? Eventually they get banned by people. And so they have to run and hide. So they go to this canyon right over the border in Colorado right there. And it's called Penitentious Canyon. And can you see the hiker in the middle?
Yeah, it's
climber.
Yeah. Wow, he's right in there.
And where he's going is to the left to the Virgin of Guadalupe painting. You see that painting?
Yeah.
So that was painted there by the brothers. And it's hard to get to. And it's the Virgin Guadalupe. And originally, next to it said Consuelo y Espíritu. And spirit, I think that's faith and spirit. or no, comfort and spirit.
Okay.
Comfort and spirit, yeah. Because they had to be comforted.
Yeah, they got kicked out of their home, right? For being too extreme and getting in everyone's business. That was the other part of that story. I won't forget,
right. It's true. Like doing their flagellations and crucifixions in downtown New Mexico. So finally, they had to go up to the canyon and do it in private, underneath that statue, underneath the painting of the Virgin, and they would crucify themselves there. They all lived in the canyons up there.
Wow.
We also talked about Sancti Servi Paraclete, the servants of the Paraclete. That organization that in Hemis Springs, where they would send all the naughty priests to.
Yeah, the child abusers.
Yeah, in Hemis Springs, to like a resort place. And people will say they shut down the resort, or they shut down that place in Hemis Springs. But I beg to differ. With the next picture, this is from LinkedIn. I just some weird research, huh? We're going to use LinkedIn as well, because it shows that the servant general of the servants of the Paraclete in Hemis Springs currently right now is this gentleman, David Fitzgerald. Remember, the founder was Gerald Fitzgerald in 1947.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, what's weird is that, so they say that they shut it down, but it's still going, because on LinkedIn it says it's still active. And before he came to Hemis Springs, where was he at before? San Bernardino. He was the vicar to the priests. He would counsel the priests in San Bernardino before they sent him to be the head priest counselor at Hemis Springs for all the naughty priests.
Oh.
Well, something's come of that. Last year, and they settled just a couple months ago, $121 million.
Nowhere near enough. What does that amount to if they were going to hand it out instead of to lawyers, to the people who were victims?
$121 million. So much so that the Archdiocese of New Mexico had to take a mortgage, a loan out on the St. Francis of Assisi Chapel, the famous chapel there in New Mexico.
Because of course the Archdiocese wouldn't help them. Of course Rome wouldn't come in and foot the bill.
Yeah. All the sexual abuse cases have bankrupted the Archdiocese of New Mexico. That's what they get. Good. You play with fire, you get burned.
Then much worse needs to happen. I don't want to. It's one of these things where it's like, yay, it's something.
Right,
better than nothing.
So. All right, let's hit the next picture. So we've gone through our Indian secret societies, our Catholic secret societies, because this is what you're going to get in New Mexico. And here, look at this beautiful Taos ski valley. Having some fireworks, celebrating. Taos ski valley, very famous. Those are the runs. You can see it on the mountain there, the run.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because Taos comes up a lot in New Age in UFO communities. It's kind of like a hippie center. At least it was, where people used to love to go there, and explore. So I'm interested. What did you find about Taos?
Well, this little ski valley resort was founded by a German Jewish immigrant from Germany. Ernie Blake is what he changed his name to, and he named 4 of the ski runs on the mountain after Project Valkyrie.
Oh, that's those guys who tried to kill Hitler, right?
Yeah. Well, guess what? He was in the army, and he was part of the what's that when you not torture people, but
interrogate?
Yeah, interrogate. He was on the interrogation team for the Nazis.
Oh, wild.
Yeah.
Who knows what dark secrets he uncovered? Jeez.
Oh, yeah. And then he comes back to New Mexico with his wife, and they build these ski slopes, and they name each run after the Nazis that tried to kill Hitler. Because there was Nazi that turned on Hitler and tried to kill him in that movie, like you see in Valkyrie.
Yeah, well, a lot of right, a lot of the people who became part of that Project Paperclip had actually, turned coat well before 45 and had been long-term like assets for the Allies, So it's a mixed bag, all of this stuff, as always, right?
Mm, mm. So, and I figured I'd have to put Nazis in there because whenever we talk about UFOs, I always got to preface with some Nazi activity.
They're always around there somewhere, right?
They seem to go together. So, all right, let's hit the next picture.
All right.
So I talked about Adam Deming was this, the Pegasus group spent billions of dollars to build this city that has no humans.
No?
It has a hospital and a school, but no humans. It has autonomous driving vehicles and AI buildings, and it's a test. It's a giant city over multiple acres, and the cars move around, the doors open, and it's called CITE, Center of Innovation, Technology, Evaluation.
Are they like trying to become a classic company town? Like what you used to have these in America before labor laws destroyed most of them. I think like there may be a couple, but the big one that everyone knows about is Disney in Florida is still a company town.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they get to set their own laws and stuff. Is that what's going on here or what?
Well, this is a test, Mark. Here they're testing AI.
Okay.
And how we live with AI, are how AI lives with us, or controls us, let's say. So facial recognition, doors open based on your eyes, retina scans, self-parking cars. You have a little chip in your palm when you walk in the store. So as you're walking out, it's already pays for. You don't have to do nothing. It already knows what you took. The car's ready because it already sensed you walking out the store, so it already comes over to pick you up. It's about efficiency. There's New Mexico was pretty trippy. We talked about the Santa Fe Institute. That's Epstein was investing in that, which is like a Stanford research dealing with this AI stuff.
Yeah, some of the most advanced science on Earth there.
Yeah, I wanted to show you this because it connects to Spaceport. And we got Roswell and all this UFO kind of stuff.
Spaceport, that's that Virgin Galactic, right? So
let's hit the next picture. And that's in Truth or Consequences.
Holy crap.
Something looks trippy, huh? Driving into that. Yeah, get ready for that. And you know who's driving there? It's Branson. Branson, Virgin Galactic. That's who's going there. The Virgin.
The other Playboy billionaire who didn't try to become king.
Yeah. But they all want to go to outer space, though. Like Blue Galactic and Tesla X, SpaceX. And so, yeah, you hit the next picture, and you'll see what the thing looks like from on top.
Oh, no way. Of course, it's the horseshoe again. It's exactly like Chaco Canyon and like the Temple of Delphi.
And so the New Mexico taxpayers had to foot the bill for this. And then they rent it out to be like the world's first spaceport. And that's really giant. So you can land some kind of vehicle and land there, and, like some Star Wars thing, and take off your hovercraft or whatever. So the only client it has right now, like I said, is Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson. And that's where supposedly coming up, he'll take you to the orbit up there. New Mexico's relationship with outer space. That's kind of like the subconscious theme, with that AI city, the spaceport. And let's hit the next picture. I don't know if you saw the movie Contact. Jodie Foster.
Yeah, I remember it had the poster has one of these giant aerial satellite arrays. And isn't that about like uncovering secret communications?
27 of them in a Y configuration acts as a what's it called? They're parabolic, and it forms an even bigger configuration by putting them that way. And they're faced towards outer space, picking up radio signals, and it can be used by the world's scientists. But it's New Mexico.
No, it's wild stuff. There's so much speculation about all of this, and Yeah. This is where it gets interesting, because you get that, to me, where I'm interested in UFOs is where they overlap with the occult and with the magic, because there's all of those speculation. Well, are these spirits just aliens? And all this stuff, and as we saw with someone like Jack Parsons, they're screaming at the top of their lungs, yes, and they're literally inventing rocket fuel and going to Roswell to try and summon Lady Babylon and bring back these alien wizards. What is going on in New Mexico? Right?
Just saying. Next week we got number 3 coming. We're gonna get into Dulce. They talk about that underground base there. There's different exorcisms and witches. We can get into the priest killing Kachina, Yale, who would kill the priest, like Holly. Remember I showed you the Kachinas?
Yeah.
And he would walk around with a crucifix in a priest's head in his hand. And it was a fetish that was invented by the Indians to protect them from the priests. Oh yeah. And one thing we're going to get into, which I am going to ask Professor Almond's help on this one, is the Shipstone Rock, or Los Lunas, actually. It's called Los Lunas petroglyph. And all these scientists come from around the world there because they think it's Paleo-Hebrew. It's carved on this rock in New Mexico.
Paleo-Hebrew? That's got to be some Mormon wackiness if I ever heard.
So for certain evangelical homies, it gives them some food to feel, to push their story forth. But part of the problems is that the writing on it is not just Paleo-Hebrew. Some people say it has some Greek on there, some ancient Greek, some Cypriot, and some Latin, and some stuff that they're saying, well, the Paleo-Hebrews wouldn't have known that script. This came later. So it kind of, even that alone, but I'd love for the professor to tell us what they can really say.
I can just imagine Ammon is going to destroy all that stuff, because this is a classic thing you'll see where a lot of these, we love to engage with the fringes and, outsider ideas. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong, but they're, sometimes they're outside for a reason, and one of the biggest reasons is they don't you bias things. Like you say, oh, I think I found something that's representative of the alphabet. And then they'll look and you'll see, look, this one looks like an A and this one looks like a B. But you're forgetting all the other alphabets, all the other letters, you found 2 and you think it conflates to something larger when really you got the most minute of connection.
Well, for folks at home, if you want to know what we're talking about, type it in. The Paleo-Hebrew stone found in New Mexico desert. So that way next week when we do a little more and decipher this. Yeah. And if you could share, subscribe, leave a comment, good or bad, Yeah.
And if you have, your own theories, your own ideas, or about your own interesting stories or conspiracies or weirdo phenomenon associated with New Mexico, come let us know. We want to know your thoughts. New Mexico, like California, is one of these really interesting, weird places, because it was in the fringes. It's the true West. It was never fully conquered. It was always its own thing, and its people have always kind of remained their own thing. And it's caused this really interesting place to explore. So as Dion was saying, thank you all for watching. Subscribe. Any last words, my friend?
Oh, just have a beautiful week. Stay blessed.
All right. Stay blessed, everyone. And we'll see you next week, same time, for part 3. Peace, love, hail Satan. Take care, everyone.